"You've disgusted me since the day I met you," Sabrina announced at my son's birthday party, her voice cutting through the laughter like a rusty knife. I smiled sweetly and replied, "Well, let's see if you like what I prepared for everyone." I reached for the TV remote and a video began playing on the big screen. The entire room fell silent as they watched. What happened next destroyed everything they thought they knew. If you're watching this, hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from. Because honey, you're about to witness the most satisfying takedown of the century. The birthday cake sat perfectly on my grandmother's antique dining table, the same table where 4 generations of my family had celebrated life's precious moments. Too bad it was now hosting a celebration for the woman who stole my house, my son, and apparently my sanity along with it. "Daniel, sweetie, could you help me with the candles?" Sabrina called out in that sugar-sweet voice that made my teeth ache. She was wearing my grandmother's pearl necklace, by the way. Because apparently taking my house wasn't enough, she needed the family jewelry too. My son Daniel rushed over like a trained puppy. At 32, you'd think he'd have developed some independence. But here we are. The guests, mostly Sabrina's friends, because heaven knows she'd driven away all of mine, chatted and laughed in what used to be my living room. Vivian, Robert, Daniel's business partner, approached me with that weird smile he always wore. Something about that man always made my skin crawl, like he was constantly plotting something. "Great party. Thanks for helping organize everything." Helping? I wanted to laugh. This was my house until 2 years ago, buddy. "Oh, you're welcome, Robert. I just love contributing to celebrations in my former home." The sarcasm flew right over his head. Naturally, little Noah, my 3-year-old grandson, tugged at my dress. "Grandma Vivian, why did you have to move away?" Before I could answer, Sabrina's voice rang out again. "Everyone gather around. Time for the birthday speech." The guests formed a circle around Daniel, who looked genuinely happy for the first time in months. Poor kid had no idea what was coming. Neither did anyone else, for that matter. Sabrina raised her wine glass, my crystal wine glass, thank you very much, and began her performance. "I just want to say how grateful I am for this beautiful family we've built together. Daniel, you've given me everything a woman could want." She paused dramatically. Then her eyes found mine across the room. The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Of course, not everyone has been supportive of our happiness. Some people just can't accept when others find true love and success. Her gaze never wavered from mine. Some people are just bitter and disgusting. The room grew uncomfortable. A few guests shifted nervously. Daniel looked mortified, but didn't say a word to defend me. Of course he didn't. Then she delivered the final blow. She leaned in close, her smile never wavering for anyone watching, and whispered directly in my ear with venom that could have killed a horse. "You've disgusted me since the day I met you." Then she pulled back, maintaining that sugar-sweet expression like she'd just complimented my dress. I could have cried. I could have stormed out. I could have thrown that crystal wine glass right at her perfectly veneered smile. Instead, I smiled back. "Well, Sabrina, let's see if you like what I prepared for everyone tonight." I walked calmly to the TV remote on the coffee table. My hands weren't even shaking. Funny how clarity feels when you finally decide to stop being the victim. I thought we could all watch a little home movie together. You know how much I love family memories. The screen flickered to life, and there it was. Crystal clear HD footage of Sabrina and Robert in what appeared to be a very intimate moment in his car outside the Marriott downtown. The room went dead silent. Not even Noah was making a sound. Sabrina's face went from smug to pale to green in about 3 seconds flat. Robert looked like he was about to have a heart attack. And me? Well, I was just getting started. But let me back up and tell you how we got to this delicious moment. Because, honey, this story didn't start with revenge. It started with the biggest mistake my son ever made. 2 years ago, Daniel was dating Emily Morrison, the sweetest girl you could imagine. She was studying to be a veterinarian, volunteered at the animal shelter, and actually helped me with my garden on weekends. You know, the kind of girl who makes you think your son might actually turn out okay. "Mom, Emily and I are talking about moving in together," Daniel had told me over Sunday dinner. I was practically planning their wedding in my head. Then Robert showed up. Daniel met Robert through some tech networking event. And suddenly my son was full of big dreams about starting their own software company. "We're going to revolutionize small business management, Mom. This could be huge." Robert seemed decent enough, married with 2 kids, drove a sensible sedan, talked about his family constantly. I thought he'd be a good influence on Daniel. Shows how much I know about reading people, right? They rented a tiny office space and worked 18-hour days. Emily barely saw Daniel anymore, but she was supportive. He's following his dreams, Mrs. Patterson. I admire that about him. God, that girl had more patience than a saint. Then they hired their first employee. Sabrina Walsh walked into that office like she owned the place, wearing a skirt that belonged in a music video and enough perfume to knock out a horse. She was 26, blonde, and had the kind of confidence that comes from knowing every man in the room is staring at you. "I'm here about the administrative assistant position," she announced. Though she looked about as administrative as a Vegas showgirl, within a week, she was flirting with Daniel. Within 2 weeks, she was staying late to help with projects. Within a month, my son was acting like a complete stranger. "Emily and I are taking a break," he announced one evening, not even looking me in the eye. "A break? Daniel, you've been together for 3 years. What happened?" "Nothing happened, Mom. We just want different things." Different things. Right. What he wanted was apparently a blonde bombshell who giggled at everything he said and wore her ambition like cheap perfume. The breakup devastated Emily. She came to see me one last time before moving back to her hometown. "I don't understand what happened, Mrs. Patterson. One day we were planning our future, and the next day he's telling me he needs space." I wanted to tell her about Sabrina, but what was the point? My son had made his choice, and it wasn't the girl who would have made him truly happy. Sometimes people lose their way, sweetheart. That doesn't mean they'll stay lost forever. How wrong I was about that last part. 6 months later, Sabrina was pregnant, and my son was planning a wedding. Because nothing says solid foundation like getting knocked up by your boss. Am I right? "Mom, we want to have the wedding here at the house," Daniel announced during one of his increasingly rare visits. Sabrina fell in love with the gardens. My gardens. The ones I'd spent 15 years cultivating. The ones Emily used to help me weed every Saturday morning. "Of course, honey. Whatever makes you happy." Because what else was I going to say? "No, you can't marry the walking red flag in my beautiful family home?" Sabrina was already acting like she lived there, rearranging my furniture when she came over and commenting on how outdated everything looked. The woman had zero class, but plenty of opinions. "This place has such potential," she told me while eyeing my mother's china cabinet. "It just needs someone with vision to modernize it." Vision. Like that was what my century-old family home was missing. The wedding was small but elegant, mostly because I planned the whole thing while Sabrina complained about morning sickness and creative differences. The creative difference being that she wanted everything pink and gold, while I was trying to maintain some dignity. After the honeymoon, which they spent in Cabo while I babysat their new office, they moved into my house, temporarily, just until we get on our feet financially, Daniel explained. "The company is doing well, but we want to save for a down payment on our own place." Temporarily. That's what they said. Robert was over constantly now, working on business plans at my dining room table and eating my food. The man had apparently forgotten he had his own home and family 40 minutes away. "Thanks for letting us crash here so much, Vivian," he'd say while polishing off my leftovers. "Sarah understands that the business requires long hours." Sarah, his wife, the one who was home raising their 2 kids while he was here playing startup entrepreneur with my pregnant daughter-in-law. Sabrina's pregnancy was like living with a hormonal tornado. She criticized everything: my cooking, my decorating, my negative energy. She complained about the water pressure, the thread count of the guest room sheets, and the fact that my house didn't have a walk-in closet big enough for her expanding wardrobe. "Daniel, your mother's house is really cramped," she'd say right in front of me. "When we get our own place, I want something more open concept." Cramped. My 4-bedroom, 3-bathroom Victorian was cramped, but the worst part wasn't her complaints. It was watching my son agree with everything she said. Daniel, who used to defend me against anyone, was now nodding along while his wife insulted everything about my life. "Mom, maybe Sabrina has a point about updating the kitchen," he'd say after she'd spent 20 minutes explaining why my vintage appliances were basically unusable. This woman was rewriting my son's entire personality, and I was front row center for the whole disaster. The day Noah was born should have been one of the happiest of my life. Instead, it was the beginning of my exile from my own family. Living with a newborn, sleep-deprived parents, and Sabrina's postpartum mood swings was like being trapped in a reality show from hell. And honey, I was definitely not winning any challenges. The baby needs quiet during the day, Sabrina informed me, as if I'd never raised a child before. So maybe you could find somewhere else to be until evening? Somewhere else to be. In my own house. Of course, I replied sweetly. I'll just live in my car while you recover. She missed the sarcasm entirely. That would be great, actually. Every day brought a new complaint. The coffee maker was too loud. My morning routine woke the baby. My friends' visits stressed her out. Basically, my entire existence was problematic. Daniel, meanwhile, was completely under her spell. When I tried to hold Noah, she'd swoop in 5 minutes later. He needs to eat, or he needs to sleep, or he needs his mother. Never mind that I'd successfully raised Daniel without a manual. Mom, Sabrina's just protective, Daniel explained when I finally confronted him. New mothers are naturally anxious. Naturally anxious. Right. Like there was anything natural about the way she guarded that baby, like I was going to kidnap him. The breaking point came 3 months after Noah was born. I was making breakfast when Sabrina appeared in the kitchen, wearing my silk robe, my favorite robe that my sister had given me for Christmas. "Oh, I hope you don't mind," she said, not looking remotely sorry. "Everything else is in the wash." That was it. That was the moment I realized I was no longer a guest in my own home. I was an unwelcome squatter. "Actually, Sabrina, I do mind. That robe has sentimental value." She rolled her eyes. "It's just a robe, Vivian. Besides, you never wear it anymore. Because you took over my entire closet." I wanted to scream. Later that morning, she cornered me in the living room while Daniel was at work and Noah was napping. "Vivian, we need to talk." She sat down across from me, arms crossed. "This situation isn't working anymore." "What situation?" "You living here. It's causing tension between Daniel and me. And that's not good for Noah." The audacity, the sheer, breathtaking audacity of this woman. "Sabrina, this is my house. Was your house. Daniel and I are married now. We're a family, and families need space to grow without interference." Without interference. From the woman who owned the house they were living in rent-free. When Daniel came home that evening, the conversation was brief and brutal. "Mom, maybe it would be better if you found your own place for a while. Just until we figure out our long-term plans." My own son was asking me to leave my family home so his wife could be more comfortable. I stared at him. This man I'd raised, sacrificed for, loved unconditionally, and realized I didn't recognize him anymore. "Fine," I said quietly. "I'll start looking for somewhere else to live." Within 2 weeks, I'd moved into a small apartment across town. I left them the house, the furniture, the gardens, and apparently any hope of maintaining a relationship with my grandson. Standing in my new cramped living room, surrounded by boxes, I made myself a promise. I would find a way back into my family. And if Sabrina thought she'd won, she was about to learn that underestimating Vivian Patterson was her first big mistake. My new apartment was about as charming as a dentist's waiting room, but it gave me something I hadn't had in months: perspective. And honey, the view from the outside was crystal clear. Something was very, very wrong with this picture. It started with little things Noah would say during my supervised visits. And yes, that's what they felt like. Supervised visits with my own grandson in my own former house. "Grandma, Uncle Robert comes over a lot when Daddy's at work," Noah mentioned one afternoon while we were coloring. He was 3 now, old enough to notice patterns, but too young to understand what they meant. "Does he now?" I kept my voice casual while my mind started connecting dots. "Yeah, and Mommy makes him special lunch. They eat in the big dining room with candles. Candles. For lunch. With my son's business partner, while my son was at the office. Call it grandmother's intuition, but alarm bells were going off in my head like a fire drill. The next week, I decided to drop by unannounced with a casserole, just being a helpful mother-in-law, you understand. When I rang the doorbell, it took almost 5 minutes for Sabrina to answer, and when she did, her hair was disheveled and her lipstick was smudged. "Vivian, what are you doing here?" "Just bringing dinner for my family." I held up the casserole dish, trying to peek around her into my former living room. "Oh, well, this isn't really a good time. Noah's napping and I was just cleaning, in a silk blouse and heels." "Sure, Sabrina. Is Robert here?" "I saw his car in the driveway." Her face went pale. We're working on some business stuff for Daniel. Business stuff that required her to look like she'd been wrestling with her paperwork. I started paying attention after that. Really paying attention. Robert's car was in my driveway every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon. Coincidentally, the days Daniel visited clients across town. Sabrina always looked guilty when I called during those times, cutting conversations short with excuses about Noah needing something or having to start dinner. But the real kicker came when I was at the grocery store and saw them together. I was in the frozen foods aisle, debating between pizza brands, because this is what my life had become, exciting decisions about processed food, when I heard familiar laughter from the next aisle over. I peeked around the corner, and there they were, Sabrina and Robert, shopping together like a couple. She was hanging on his arm, giggling at something he'd said, while he pushed the cart with one hand and kept the other around her waist. They looked comfortable, intimate, like they'd done this 1,000 times before. I followed them through the store, because yes, I became that person and watched them interact like they were married. She'd grab items off shelves, and he'd nod approval. He'd suggest things, and she'd add them to their cart. They even argued about brands like an old married couple. At the checkout, I watched him pay for everything with his credit card while she loaded bags into their cart. Then, right there in front of God and the teenage cashier, Robert leaned down and kissed her. Not a friendly peck, a real kiss. The kind married people give each other after 15 years together. My heart was pounding so hard I thought I might pass out right there between the tabloids and the impulse candy. I sat in my car in that parking lot for 20 minutes, trying to process what I'd just witnessed. My daughter-in-law was having an affair with my son's business partner, in broad daylight, like they didn't even care who saw them. The worst part? I wasn't even surprised. Deep down, I think I'd known something was off from the beginning. All those late nights, working, all those meaningful glances across the dinner table, all those times Robert showed up when Daniel wasn't home. Now I had to decide what to do about it. And let me tell you, the options were all terrible. You know what's worse than discovering your daughter-in-law is cheating on your son? Trying to tell your son about it and having him treat you like you're the villain in a soap opera. I waited 3 days, rehearsing the conversation in my head 100 different ways. How do you tell someone their world is falling apart? Especially when that someone has already chosen his wife over his mother more times than I cared to count. I finally called Daniel and asked him to come over to my apartment. Just the two of us. No Sabrina, no Noah, no distractions. Mom, is everything okay? You sounded weird on the phone. He looked tired, older than his 32 years. The stress of running a business was showing, and I was about to add a whole lot more stress to his life. Daniel, I need to tell you something. And I need you to really listen to me. Okay. He settled back in my second-hand armchair, the one that didn't match anything else in my tiny living room. I think Sabrina is having an affair. The words hung in the air like smoke. Daniel's expression went from concerned to confused to angry in about 3 seconds. What did you just say? I saw her with Robert at the grocery store. They were together. Like, together. Daniel stood up abruptly. Mom, what the hell? I know how it sounds, but I saw them kissing. And Noah mentioned that Robert comes over when you're not home and… Stop. Daniel held up his hand. Just stop right there. I can't believe you're doing this. Doing what? Telling you the truth? Making up stories about my wife, creating drama because you can't accept that she and I are happy. The accusation hit like a slap. Daniel, I'm not making anything up. I saw them with my own eyes. You saw what you wanted to see because you've never liked Sabrina. You've been looking for reasons to break us up since day one. That's not true, isn't it? He was pacing now, running his hands through his hair. You've never given her a chance. You compare her to Emily constantly. You criticize everything she does, and now you're spreading rumors about her cheating? I'm not spreading rumors. I'm telling you what I witnessed. With Robert? Mom, Robert's been my best friend and business partner for 3 years. He's married. He has kids. He would never… People make mistakes, Daniel. Even good people. Not Robert. And not Sabrina. He turned to face me, and the look in his eyes broke my heart. I can't believe my own mother would stoop this low. I felt tears starting to burn behind my eyes. Honey, I know this is hard to hear, but it's hard to hear because it's a lie. Sabrina loves me. We have a son together. We're building a life together, and you're so jealous and bitter that you're trying to destroy it with made-up gossip. Daniel, please, just pay attention. Notice when Robert comes over. Notice how they act around each other. I'm not spying on my wife because my mother has paranoid delusions. He grabbed his jacket and headed for the door. I followed him, desperate to make him understand. If I'm wrong, Then prove me wrong, me. But if I'm right, you're not right. He spun around at the door. And I don't want to hear another word about this. Not from you, not from anyone. Sabrina is my wife, Robert is my partner, and you need to accept that and stop trying to cause problems. Daniel, I mean it, Mom. No more accusations. No more suspicious theories. No more trying to turn me against the people I love. If you can't support my marriage, then maybe you shouldn't be part of our lives. The door slammed behind him, leaving me alone, with the echo of his words and the devastating realization that my son trusted everyone except me. But here's the thing about being a mother. Sometimes you have to save your children from themselves, even when they hate you for it, especially when they hate you for it. If my son wanted proof, I was going to get him proof. The kind of proof that couldn't be dismissed as a bitter mother-in-law's imagination. I found Marcus Webb through a Google search and 3 cups of coffee-fueled determination. He ran a private investigation service with 5-star reviews and a website that promised discretion, professionalism, and results. His office was in a strip mall between a nail salon and a tax service, which somehow made it feel more legitimate. Like he wasn't trying to be dramatic about ruining people's lives, just professional. Mrs. Patterson, I have to ask, are you prepared for what we might find? Marcus was probably 50, with kind eyes and the demeanor of someone who'd delivered bad news before. Sometimes these investigations reveal more than clients expect. Mr. Webb, I've already seen enough to know something's wrong. I just need documentation that my son will believe. Understood. I'll need photos of both subjects, addresses, typical schedules, and a retainer of $1,500. $1,500. Half of my monthly budget. But what price do you put on your son's future? The surveillance started immediately. Marcus had equipment that would make the FBI jealous. Long-range cameras, audio recording devices, GPS tracking systems, all legal, all admissible, all capable of capturing the truth in high definition. Your instincts were correct, Marcus called me after the first week. We've documented 3 meetings at the Marriott downtown, Tuesday and Thursday afternoons, consistent with your timeline. My heart sank and soared at the same time. Vindication felt surprisingly hollow when it meant your family was falling apart. How long has this been going on? Based on their behavior patterns, I'd estimate at least 6 months, possibly longer. They're very comfortable with each other. This isn't a new relationship. 6 months. While I was living in their house, watching them play happy family, Sabrina was sneaking around with Robert every chance she got. The evidence kept mounting. Photos of them entering and leaving the hotel, video of intimate conversations in restaurant booths, audio recordings of phone calls that left zero doubt about the nature of their relationship. But the real bombshell came in week 3. Mrs. Patterson, I need to see you in person. We've discovered something that changes everything. I drove to Marcus's office with my hands shaking on the steering wheel. What could be worse than what we'd already found? Robert Wright is married to Sarah Wright. They have 2 children, ages 8 and 10. But here's what you need to know. Robert's been having affairs for years. Sarah Wright filed for divorce 6 months ago, citing adultery and mental cruelty. So he's getting divorced? Yes, but there's more. During my background check, I discovered that Robert has a pattern of targeting business partners' wives. This happened with his previous company in Phoenix. Same pattern. Intimate relationship with the wife, destruction of the business partnership, financial complications. A pattern. This wasn't just an affair, it was a strategy. There's something else, Mrs. Patterson. I ran a financial check on your son's business. Robert Wright has been systematically moving assets into accounts that only he controls. If your son's marriage implodes, he stands to lose everything: his wife, his business, and potentially his parental rights. The room started spinning. This wasn't just about adultery anymore. This was about destruction. Complete, calculated destruction of my son's entire life. I need copies of everything, I managed to say. Every photo, every recording, every document. I'll have it ready tomorrow. But Mrs. Patterson, I have to ask, what are you planning to do with this information? I thought about Daniel's birthday party, just 2 weeks away. I thought about Sabrina wearing my grandmother's pearls and sleeping in my bed and raising my grandson in my house while she destroyed my son's life behind his back. I'm going to give my son the birthday present he deserves, I said. The truth. The moment had arrived, and honestly, It was even more satisfying than I'd imagined during all those sleepless nights in my cramped apartment. The video played on my 75-inch TV, the one I'd stupidly left behind when I moved out, showing crystal clear footage of Sabrina and Robert in what you might charitably call a compromising position outside the Marriott Hotel. The silence in the room was deafening. 23 people watching my daughter-in-law's secret life unfold in high definition. You could have heard a pin drop if pins made sounds when they were shattering people's entire world view. Sabrina went from pale to green to the color of old cottage cheese. She kept opening and closing her mouth like a fish out of water, trying to form words that would somehow explain away what everyone was seeing. Robert looked like he was about to have a stroke. Sweat was literally beading on his forehead as he glanced frantically between the screen, Sabrina, and the exit. But the best part, the absolutely delicious part, was watching the other guests' faces. You know that moment in a movie when everyone realizes the villain's true identity? That was happening in real time in my former living room. "Turn it off!" Sabrina finally found her voice, lunging toward the TV remote in my hand. "Turn it off right now." "Oh, but we're just getting to the good part," I said sweetly, stepping out of her reach. "Everyone should see what you've been doing while Daniel's been working to support his family." The video continued. Marcus had done excellent work. The footage was undeniably clear, unmistakably intimate, and absolutely devastating. There was Sabrina and Robert kissing like teenagers in his car. There they were entering the hotel room. There they were having what appeared to be a very personal conversation over lunch at Romano's. Daniel finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "How long?" He wasn't looking at me. He was staring at his wife, who was still scrambling for explanations that didn't exist. "Daniel, I can explain." "How long, Sabrina? It's not what it looks like." "How long?" Daniel's voice cracked like a whip across the room. Robert finally found his courage, or what passed for it. "Daniel, man, I can explain everything." That's when Daniel snapped. My son launched himself across the room at his business partner with a fury I'd never seen before. It took 3 guests to hold him back, while Robert stumbled backward into the birthday cake. My beautiful, expensive birthday cake that I'd ordered special. What a waste. "You son of a—" Daniel was fighting against the men holding him back, trying to get at Robert. "You lying, cheating—" "Daniel, stop!" Sabrina was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks like black tears. "Please, just stop and listen." But the chaos was just beginning. Sarah Wright, Robert's soon-to-be ex-wife, had been sitting quietly in the corner during the entire revelation. I'd made sure she was invited, naturally. A woman deserves to know what her husband's been up to, don't you think? Sarah stood up slowly, walked across the room with purpose, and delivered the most satisfying slap I've ever witnessed directly across Sabrina's tear-stained face. "That's for sleeping with my husband, you home-wrecking witch!" The sound echoed through the room like a gunshot. Sabrina staggered backward, holding her cheek, while Sarah turned to face the crowd. "Everyone here should know that this woman has been having an affair with my husband for 8 months. 8 months of lies, sneaking around, and destroying 2 families for her own selfish pleasure." Several guests had their phones out, recording everything. In about 20 minutes, this would be all over social media. Sabrina's humiliation would be permanently documented for the world to see. And me? I was standing there with the remote control in my hand, watching 15 years of patience finally pay off. "The show's over, folks," I announced to the room. "Thank you all for coming to Daniel's birthday party. I think we've all learned something valuable about the people we trust." I grabbed my purse, walked to the door, and turned back one last time. "Sabrina, honey," I called out sweetly. "The house keys are on the kitchen counter. Time to find your own place to live." Then I walked out of my former home, leaving the destruction exactly where it belonged, in someone else's hands for once. The fallout was swift and brutal. Within 24 hours, Daniel had filed for divorce. By the end of the week, he'd served Sabrina with separation papers, demanding she vacate the house. Over the following months, while lawyers battled and paperwork crawled through the court system, she was living in a cheap motel while her attorney tried to figure out how to spin adultery into financial advantage. But Sabrina wasn't going down without a fight, and her definition of fighting involved trying to take everything that wasn't nailed down. "She wants half the business," Daniel told me during our first real conversation in 6 months. He looked exhausted, defeated, but finally, he was talking to me like I was his mother instead of his enemy. "Half the business? On what grounds? She claims she contributed to its success. Late nights, business dinners, emotional support. He laughed bitterly. Emotional support, while she was sleeping with my business partner. We were sitting in my cramped apartment, drinking coffee from mismatched mugs because I'd left all the good dishes at the house. Daniel looked around my small living space with something like guilt in his eyes. Mom, I'm sorry. About everything. About not believing you. About choosing her over you. About making you leave your own house. Honey, you don't need to. Yes, I do. I was blind. Completely, stupidly blind. And you tried to warn me. I reached across the small table and took his hand. You loved her. Love makes people do crazy things. Trust me, I know something about that. But our reunion was interrupted by my phone ringing. Unknown number, which usually meant telemarketer or trouble. In this case, it was definitely trouble. You destroyed my life, Sabrina's voice screeched through the speaker. You vindictive old witch. You destroyed everything. Sabrina, I didn't destroy anything. I just showed people what you'd already done. I'm going to make you pay for this. You think you won? You think you're so smart? I'm going to take everything from Daniel, and it's all going to be your fault. The threats continued for another 2 minutes before I hung up. Daniel looked concerned. Mom, maybe you should stay somewhere else for a while. She sounds unhinged. Unhinged was putting it mildly. Over the next few weeks, Sabrina's behavior became increasingly erratic. She showed up at Daniel's office making scenes. She called me at all hours with increasingly creative threats. She even tried to turn Noah against Daniel by telling him, Daddy's being mean to Mommy. The custody battle was nasty. Sabrina demanded full custody, claiming Daniel was an unfit father because he prioritized work over family. Never mind that she'd been prioritizing Robert over family for 8 months. The business partnership with Robert imploded exactly as you'd expect. Robert tried to claim he deserved half of everything since he'd been instrumental in the company's growth. His lawyer argued that the personal relationship with Sabrina was irrelevant to his business contributions. Daniel's lawyer disagreed, vigorously. Breach of fiduciary duty, she explained to us. When a business partner has an affair with the other partner's spouse, it creates a massive conflict of interest. Everything Robert did for the past 8 months can be questioned. The financial forensics revealed that Robert had indeed been moving money around, setting up accounts, and positioning himself to take control of the company. Marcus had been right. This was a pattern, a calculated destruction. But the real shocker was still coming. During the divorce proceedings, Sabrina's lawyer demanded a paternity test for Noah. It was a desperate move, trying to create leverage by questioning Daniel's parental rights. The results came back on a Tuesday afternoon. Daniel called me immediately. Mom, can you sit down? My heart stopped. What is it? Noah isn't my son. He's Robert's. The room started spinning. 5 years. 5 years of loving that little boy, watching him grow, being his grandmother. 5 years of Daniel being a father to a child who wasn't his. Daniel, I'm so sorry. You know what the crazy part is, Mom? After the shock wore off, I realized I don't care about biology. Noah is still my son in every way that matters. I've raised him since birth. I'm the only father he's ever known, and I've loved him every single day. Sabrina's lies can't change that, but she was certainly going to try. The paternity revelation should have been the end of the story, but it was actually just the beginning of the final act. And honey, this final act had more twists than a pretzel factory. Robert's reaction to discovering he was Noah's biological father was about as classy as you'd expect from a man who'd been cheating on 2 families simultaneously. I want nothing to do with that kid, he told his lawyer during a deposition that Daniel's attorney shared with us. That's Daniel's problem now. Charming? Real Father of the Year material there. Meanwhile, Sabrina was trying to use Noah's paternity as leverage in every possible way. She demanded more money from Daniel because he wasn't even the real father. She tried to get Robert to pay child support, but he'd lawyered up and was claiming financial hardship while fighting his own messy divorce. The man who'd seemed so confident destroying other people's lives suddenly became a coward when it was time to face consequences. The business partnership was officially dissolved, with Robert getting exactly what he deserved, nothing. The forensic accounting revealed he'd been embezzling money for months, which meant he was facing criminal charges on top of losing everything in his divorce. Sarah Wright, his ex-wife, got the house, the cars, the retirement accounts, and full custody of their children. She also got a restraining order after Robert showed up drunk at her sister's house, demanding what was rightfully his. Some people just never learn when to quit, you know? But the most beautiful part of this whole mess was watching Daniel transform back into the man I'd raised. The fog of Sabrina's manipulation was lifting, and my real son was emerging from the wreckage. "Mom, I want you to move back into the house," he told me one evening while we were watching Noah play with blocks on my apartment floor. "Daniel, that's your home now. You and Noah need your space." "It was never my home. It was yours. Grandmother's house, your garden, your memories. I was just borrowing it, and I let someone else ruin it." I looked around my tiny apartment, the mismatched furniture, the thin walls, the view of the parking lot, and then at my son's earnest face. "What about Sabrina? The divorce isn't final yet. She signed away any claim to the house yesterday. Turns out when you're caught cheating and trying to steal business assets, your negotiating position isn't very strong." The house felt different when I walked back into it 3 days later. Bigger, somehow, like it had been holding its breath during my exile and could finally exhale. Sabrina had done some damage. My grandmother's crystal was missing, along with several pieces of jewelry and my mother's silver tea service. But those were just things. The bones of the house, the heart of it, was still intact. Daniel had already started repairs. The walls that had been painted in Sabrina's preferred beige were being restored to their original warm colors. The garden, which had been neglected for 2 years, was getting professional attention. "I found Emily," Daniel mentioned casually while we were having coffee in the kitchen. The same kitchen where Sabrina had insulted everything about my life. "Emily Morrison? Your Emily?" "She's Dr. Emily Morrison now. She finished veterinary school and has a practice about an hour away. We've been talking." He paused, looking vulnerable. "It took some convincing. She was hurt, Mom. Really hurt. But we're taking it slow, rebuilding trust." The hope in his voice was unmistakable. After everything he'd been through, after all the damage and betrayal and humiliation, he was still capable of hope. "And how does she feel about Noah?" Daniel smiled. The first genuine smile I'd seen from him in years. "She said any child of mine is a child she could love. Biology doesn't matter to her." It never did. That's when I knew everything was going to be okay. Not immediately, not without work and time and healing, but eventually. Because the people who matter don't care about your mistakes or your baggage or your complicated family situation. They just care about you. 18 months later, I was standing in my garden, my restored, beautiful, blooming garden, watching Noah chase butterflies while Daniel and Emily planned their second chance at happiness. The divorce had been final for 6 months. Sabrina had moved 3 states away to live with some cousin who was apparently the only family member still speaking to her. She got exactly what she deserved. No house, no business assets, minimal visitation with Noah, and a reputation that followed her like a bad smell. Robert was serving 2 years for embezzlement and fraud. Turned out his pattern of financial manipulation went back further than anyone realized, and when 3 different business partners came forward with similar stories, the FBI got involved. Sarah Wright was rebuilding her life with her children, a new job that actually appreciated her accounting skills, and a healthy settlement from Robert's seized assets. And me? I was exactly where I belonged, in the house that had sheltered 4 generations of my family, watching my grandson grow up surrounded by love instead of lies. "Grandma Vivian!" Noah ran up to me with dirt on his hands and joy on his face. "Look what I found!" He held up a small garden snake, completely unafraid. Emily laughed from across the yard. "That's just a garter snake, Noah. They're good for the garden because they eat bugs. Can we keep him?" "Wild things belong in the wild, sweetie," I told him, "but we can visit him in the garden whenever we want." Daniel appeared beside us, putting his arm around Emily's waist in a gesture so natural it looked like they'd never been apart. "Mom, we have news," he said, grinning like a teenager. Emily held up her left hand, showing off a modest but beautiful engagement ring. "We're getting married. Again. Properly this time." I looked at these 2 people who'd found their way back to each other, despite years of interference and manipulation, and I felt something I hadn't experienced in a long time. Complete, perfect contentment. "When?" I asked. "Next spring," Emily said. "In the garden, if that's okay with you. Small ceremony, just family and close friends. Noah can be the ring bearer," Daniel added. "If he wants to, that is." Noah, who was still holding the snake and only half listening to adult conversation, perked up. Ring bearer? Like a real bear? Bearer? Sweetie, you'd carry the rings down the aisle for Daddy and Emily. Cool. Can I bring my snake? We all laughed, the kind of laughter that comes from genuine happiness instead of forced politeness or hidden agendas. Later that evening, after Emily had gone home and Noah was asleep upstairs in the room that had once been Daniel's, my son and I sat on the front porch watching the sunset. Do you ever regret it, Mom? The way you exposed everything? Some people might say it was cruel. I thought about that question, really thought about it. Was I proud of orchestrating Sabrina's public humiliation? Did I enjoy watching her world crumble in front of 23 witnesses? Daniel, I spent 2 years watching that woman destroy everything I cared about. My home, my relationship with you, my grandson's stability. She made choices, and choices have consequences. I just made sure the consequences finally caught up with her. But the public humiliation part was necessary. If I'd just told you privately, again, would you have believed me? Or would you have found another way to dismiss the evidence and blame me for causing trouble? He was quiet for a long moment. I probably would have found a way to blame you. I was so deep in her manipulation that I couldn't see straight. Exactly. Sometimes the truth needs to be undeniable. Sometimes justice needs an audience. We sat in comfortable silence, watching the fireflies start their evening dance in my restored garden. The house behind us was full of the right kind of sounds. A child sleeping safely, the dishwasher running, the gentle hum of a home that was finally at peace. Thank you, Mom, for not giving up on me, for fighting for our family even when I was too blind to see what you were fighting against. I reached over and squeezed his hand. That's what mothers do, honey. We see the threats our children can't see, and we do whatever it takes to protect them, even when they hate us for it. I never hated you. Yes, you did, for a while, and that was okay, because I knew eventually you'd understand. The truth is, I'd do it all again. Every sleepless night in that cramped apartment, every dollar spent on the private investigator, every moment of being treated like the villain in my own family's story, because sitting here now, watching my son reclaim his happiness and my grandson grow up surrounded by genuine love, I know it was all worth it. Sometimes being the hero means being willing to be the bad guy first. Sometimes saving your family means destroying the illusion they're living in. And sometimes, just sometimes, the good guys actually win. If you enjoyed this story of justice served cold, make sure to subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Because, honey, if there's one thing I've learned, it's that the truth always comes out in the end. And when it does, you want to be on the right side of it. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.